Welcome to our deep dive into atomic habits. I know a lot of you are looking for ways to make those small changes that lead to big results, and James Clear's book, it really is a treasure trove of strategies. But we're not going to just skim the surface.
No, not at
We're
all.
going to really connect these concepts to your goals, your habits, and maybe even bust a few myths along the way.
Yeah, I think you'll be surprised by how much power you have, over those things that feel automatic once you start to see how they actually work.
One of the things that really clicked for me early on was this idea of the plateau of latent potential. Clear uses this ice cube analogy, which I thought was just so helpful. Um, have you ever felt like you were putting in the work but not really seeing any results? And then all of a sudden, bam, everything shifts.
It's that consistency over time,
Oh,
right? It's that idea that those little things we do each day, they build up and then bam, the results show up. Like imagine an ice cube melting. At 31 degrees, nothing's happening, but then you hit 32 and suddenly breakthrough. It's the same with our habits. It's not always the big dramatic efforts. It's those consistent small actions.
that's why it's atomic habits, right?
Yeah.
Tiny changes. But over time, wow. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I'd love to get your take on this. The book talks about how our identity shapes our habits. It's not just about changing the behavior. It's about really shifting how we see ourselves. It's almost like a fake it till you make it kind of thing.
It's aligning your actions with the person you want to become. Clear, he argues that the things we believe about ourselves, those I'm the type of person who statements, they actually drive our actions way more than we realize. There's this great quote in the book, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Oh, I love that. It's like we're casting votes for our future self.
Exactly.
With every single habit. Okay, this is making me think, what identity am I reinforcing right now with the choices I'm making every day? Is that actually lining up with the person I want to be?
Yeah, these are great questions. It all comes down to really understanding how habits actually work. Clara lays out this thing called the habit loop. It's like this four-stage cycle. It's always running in the back of our minds.
So break down this habit loop for us. How does it work?
It starts with a cue, something in our environment. It triggers the brain. Okay, then you have the craving, which is the desire for a reward.
Okay.
That leads to the response, the actual action. And then you get the reward, which makes you more likely to repeat the whole cycle. It reinforces the habit.
So our brains are like constantly analyzing our surroundings for these cues and then just automatically responding based on our past experiences. It's like our brains are prediction machines. That notification sound on your phone,
Yeah.
checking for messages,
Response.
dopamine hit. Oh, it all makes sense now. And this loop, it can be so powerful, for good or for bad. Clear tells this story about therapists who quit smoking, but years later, decades later, a single cue brings it all back. They were riding horses with a friend.
It's incredible how these little subconscious triggers can control us.
That's wild. It really makes you think about all those little things that are shaping our actions every single day.
Yeah. And it's not all about willpower like we tend to think. It's more about dopamine.
Okay, tell me more about this dopamine connection.
Dopamine's like the brain's reward chemical,
Uh-huh.
and it drives us towards pleasurable activities, makes them habit forming.
Okay.
There was this study with mice where every time they pressed a lever, got this surge of dopamine, and guess what? They'd press it like crazy.
Just for the dopamine.
Yeah, hundreds of times an hour. Just goes to show. Like, think about slot machines, social media, junk food. It's all triggering these dopamine releases. We crave it, even when we know it's not good for us.
So we're battling our own brain chemistry. But how can we use this to our advantage? How do we make the habits that are good for us just as appealing?
That's the question, right? And luckily, Claire's got some practical strategies in the book. Have you ever heard of implementation intentions?
Implementation intentions. No, that's new to me. What is that?
It's about making a specific plan, not just a vague goal. Like instead of saying, I'm going to exercise more, you say, I will go for a run at 7 a.m. tomorrow in the park. Specific.
Ah, so no more being vague. You're basically setting yourself up for success before you even start.
Exactly. The research on this is amazing. Like there was one study where people used implementation intentions for an exercise habit. 91% success rate.
91%. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty convincing. Okay, what else? What other tricks are there?
Habit stacking.
Habit stacking.
Yeah, it's about linking a new habit to an existing one. Like, after I make coffee, I'll meditate for 2 minutes. You're using that existing routine.
Ah, so it's not starting from scratch.
Right, you're making it automatic.
Okay, that's clever. That's really clever. But what about those times when we need, like, a little extra push. I mean, some things we just don't want to do.
Well, that's where temptation bundling comes in.
Okay, temptation bundling. I like the sound of that.
It's combining something you need to do with something you want to do. Like only watching your favorite show while you're on the treadmill.
I get it. You make the have-tos more enjoyable. So we've got plans, we're stacking habits, we're bundling temptations. This is good. But what about, I know Claire talks a lot about how our surroundings can influence our habits. What about that?
You're right. Our environment is huge. It's those cues, remember, 10 million sensory receptors just for sight. We're bombarded. These cues can trigger good or bad habits.
So what are some ways we can set up our environment to support those good habits and make the bad ones less appealing? Like specific examples.
Well, you could put your running shoes by the door, right?
Huh.
Or keep a bowl of fruit on the counter. It's all about visual cues, making good choices easy and bad choices less obvious, like out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're talking about curating our space, both physically and even socially, to support those good habits.
Exactly. You're setting yourself up for success.
I love it. It's like we're starting to see these hidden forces that have been controlling us all along. This is eye-opening.
Right. The more we understand those forces, the more we can change them. Are you ready to dive into some tactics for breaking bad habits?
I'm ready. Let's do it. All right. So we've talked about how our environment, those cues, can really influence our habits. But let's get into the nitty-gritty. How do we break those bad habits? The ones that just seem to stick around no matter what we do.
Right. Some habits, they feel impossible to shake. But remember that story about the Vietnam War veterans and heroin addiction?
Oh, yeah, that was incredible. It's amazing how so many of them were able to kick their heroin habit almost overnight, just by returning to an environment without those triggers.
It shows you the power of context, right? I mean, they were in a place where heroin use was just constantly triggered. Easy access, stress, everyone around them was using. But back home, those triggers were gone. And the habit, it just went dormant.
So sometimes it's not about willpower. It's about strategically changing our surroundings
Yeah.
to remove those temptations.
Absolutely. And Clear, he talks about these things called commitment devices, ways to lock in good behavior or make bad habits much harder to do, like when you're talking about hiding your phone to avoid distractions.
Oh, yeah, sometimes I literally have to hide my phone from myself.
That's a commitment device.
It sounds silly, but it works.
And there are so many creative ways to use them. You want to curb online shopping, remove your saved credit card info, or those browser extensions that block shopping sites?
Oh, yeah.
Make it inconvenient, add friction to that bad habit.
Okay, but what about when you can't change the environment? Like you're at work or a social event and there are temptations everywhere.
Yeah.
What then?
Then it comes down to mindset. Remember how we talked about reframing tasks, focusing on the positive?
Yes.
Well, we can use that same approach with those less enjoyable tasks.
How do you make something you don't want to do feel rewarding? I'm curious.
It's not about pretending to love, like doing your taxes or cleaning the bathroom. It's about shifting your perspective. So instead of, I have to go to the gym, you say, I get to go to the gym. Subtle, but it emphasizes the opportunity.
Instead of, I have to cook dinner, I can say, I get to nourish my body. It sounds cheesy, but I see how that shift in language could really make a difference.
Right. You're focusing on the benefits. Even something like doing dishes can be seen as self-care, creating a clean and peaceful space.
And it ties back to that identity piece, right? If you see yourself as someone who values their health or their home environment, then those actions become part of who you are.
Exactly. It all comes together. Your identity, your environment, the strategies you choose.
So it's like we're creating a system that supports our desired behaviors.
That's it.
But even with all that, getting started is still hard. I mean, in the beginning, those good habits, they just feel like a struggle.
Yeah. Well, for that, there's Claire's 2-minute rule.
Okay, the 2-minute rule, tell me everything.
So when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
Wait, just 2 minutes? Most habits take way longer than that. How's that going to work?
It's not about finishing the whole habit in 2 minutes. It's about making the starting point so easy you can't say no. You reduce that initial friction.
So it's all about momentum, getting the ball rolling.
Yeah, think about reading. Don't aim for a whole chapter, just one page. Once you've read that page, you're more likely to keep going, right? You've overcome the resistance.
It's like you're tricking your brain into taking action.
Well, not tricking. It's about working with our brains, understanding how they operate.
Okay, fair enough. But those 2 minutes, they're going to get easy,
Yeah.
right?
And then you use what Clear calls habit shaping. Gradually increase the difficulty or the time. Like with meditating, you've mastered 2 minutes, so then bump it to 3, then 5. You're stretching that comfort zone slowly.
Like climbing stairs one step at a time.
Yeah, no need to jump to the top right away. It's about that gradual improvement. And as you go, it's important to pay attention to feedback. Adjust your approach if needed.
So track our progress and make tweaks.
Exactly. Clear, he's big on reflection. Look at your habits maybe every week or month and ask what's working, what's not, what needs to change.
It's like a performance review for your habits.
It is. And sometimes those little wins, those small signs that things are shifting, they're the most important feedback.
Yeah, we can get so focused on the big goal, we miss those little victories along the way. Okay, speaking of staying on track, what about the Goldilocks Rule? I remember that being a key idea in the book. So the Goldilocks Rule, it sounds kind of fun. It makes me think of, Goldilocks and the three bears. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot for our habits, the challenge level. Not too easy, not too hard, but just right to keep you engaged.
So if it's too easy, we get bored; too hard, we get frustrated.
Yeah.
But in that Goldilocks zone, that's where the magic happens. That's where we get into flow, right?
Exactly. Think about those times when you've been so absorbed in something, you completely lose track of time. That's flow. Effortless, you're just in the zone.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like when I'm working on a creative project and hours just disappear.
Right. And those are often signs that you've found something that really aligns with your strengths, your natural talents. It goes back to that explore exploit idea we talked about. Try new things, find what pulls you in.
Right, experiment, find those habits that just feel right, and then focus on those. Build them into your routine.
Exactly. You want those activities that are both challenging and rewarding, that push you a little bit, but not too much.
Okay, this is all making sense. We've got the science, the environment, the mindset, even this flow state. But what about the long game? Life happens, right? Motivation dips, we hit roadblocks. Those old habits, they try to sneak back in.
Of course, building habits, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You will have setbacks, but that's why having a system is so important.
So what do we do to prepare for those moments of doubt? When you just want to give up, does Clear have any advice for those inevitable slip-ups?
He does. You need a plan. He calls it a failure plan. It's not about expecting to fail. It's about acknowledging that it happens and having a strategy to get back on track quickly.
So like a safety net, so you don't fall all the way down.
Exactly. And his mantra for this is never miss twice. So you miss a workout or you have that extra dessert, acknowledge it, but don't let it become a pattern. Get back on track right away.
Never miss twice. I love that. It's like one mistake doesn't derail everything.
Right. It's progress, not perfection. And this is where reflection comes in. We talked about tracking, but Clear also says regular review, like weekly or monthly, can help you stay on course. Make those adjustments as you go.
So step back, look at the big picture, see what's working, what's not.
Yeah, he suggests questions like, what went well this week? What didn't? What can I change? Like a performance review, but for your habits.
I love that. A habit performance review. It makes it all
Yeah.
so much more intentional.
And remember, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Just like with the strategies, find what works for you. What works best might change over time.
It's all about being adaptable, learning as you go. This is making me realize that building habits, it's much more dynamic than I thought. It's not about setting a goal and just rigidly sticking to it no matter what. It's about being flexible, making adjustments along the way.
You got it. And that leads to a really important point. This is an ongoing process. It's not about reaching some destination and then you're done. It's a lifestyle, continuous growth.
It's a journey, not a destination. There's no finish line, right? Even once a habit's established, it still needs attention.
It's like a garden. You got to keep watering it, weeding it. It's constant work, but the rewards are worth it.
And just like a garden can change over time, so can our habits. This has been so insightful. We've really uncovered some great stuff from Atomic Habits.
It's about working smarter, not harder, right?
Right. Setting ourselves up for success, understanding our brains, our environment, our mindset, finding those strategies that really click.
And those small improvements, over time, they can lead to amazing results.
This has been such a fantastic deep dive into Atomic Habits. Thanks for joining us. We hope you're feeling inspired to put these ideas into action.
Even tiny changes, remember, they can make a huge difference. Keep experimenting, keep learning, keep growing.
And until next time, happy habit building.